Welcome to this explainer. Look, if you've ever felt like modern life is just completely running you down, well, you are definitely not alone. Today, we're diving straight into the health capital framework. It's this absolutely fascinating model that basically acts as a bridge. It takes ancient wisdom, literal ancient maps of human physiology, and translates them into super practical modern tools to help us build real, lasting resilience against the chronic stress of the 21st century.
Let me ask you something. Are you actually thriving right now? Or are you just kind of surviving with this constant low-level buzz of exhaustion, right? We are constantly bombarded. Complex social demands, endless digital noise, a pace that literally never stops. It's just the perfect recipe for digital burnout. And as we'll see today, this overwhelming feeling, it's not just in your head. It actually has a very real, measurable physical pipeline.
So let's jump right into Section 1, our modern stress epidemic. This is our new baseline. To really understand why we feel so drained, we have to look at the sheer, massive contrast between our everyday reality and our ancestors. I mean, think about it. You rarely have to sprint away from a literal tiger on your way to work, right? But instead of those short, super intense bursts of survival mode, our environment has just fundamentally transformed. What we face now is ubiquitous, low-grade, chronic stress. It's just a constant baseline that never ever fully shuts off.
And because this modern threat literally never leaves us, our stress response has actually shifted. It's gone from being a life-saving tool into what is arguably the single most detrimental factor to global health today. In medical terms, chronic psychological stress operates as the ultimate distal determinant, which, is really just a fancy academic way of saying it's the root cause of the causes. It's the match that lights the whole cascade of physical ailments.
You see, our basic human vulnerabilities remain exactly the same as they were in ancient times, but the scale, it's completely shifted. First off, our nervous systems are just hyperstimulated, constantly battered by digital communication and totally unstable schedules, which leads straight to anxiety and insomnia. Add in highly competitive workplaces and processed diets that just inflame our systems, and then top it all off with sedentary lifestyles and calorie-dense foods that drive lethargy and metabolic syndrome. It's a lot, right? Which brings us to Section 2, the chronic disease pipeline. This is how we move from a psychological burden to actual physical illness. This journey from feeling stressed out to being physically sick happens through a surprisingly predictable sequence. It starts right at the distal root, chronic stress. When this stress overstimulates our mind, we start making proximate behavioral changes. You know the ones, maladaptive coping mechanisms like getting terrible sleep or binging on junk food. That degrades our system and leads to proximate biological disruption. Essentially, your body's central alarm system, the HPA axis, just gets stuck in overdrive, causing massive systemic inflammation. And if we don't actively shut this loop down upstream, we inevitably hit the clinical end, which is chronic disease.
Okay, so how do we stop this? Let's look at Section 3, Ancient Wisdom, Modern Defense.
The secret to shutting down this toxic loop actually comes from ancient wisdom, which is just brilliant. Take Ayurveda's definition of true happiness, or Sukha. It isn't some fleeting, temporary emotion like a sugar rush. It's defined as Sattva, which is a sustainable, steady state of internal clarity. And this internal state isn't automatic. It must be actively cultivated because it acts as the absolute vital interface between you and the chaotic world outside.
But of course, that internal state doesn't just exist in a vacuum. It interacts with the world through something called Ahara. Now, traditionally, Ahara translates to anything taken into the body or mind. We usually just think of food when we hear that, right? But crucially, it also includes sensory inputs. In our modern, day-to-day lives, Ahara is the high-arousal digital stimuli, the blaring urban noise, the endless doom scrolling on social media, and all those complex social demands we're consuming every single minute of the day.
And here's the kicker. If we consume all of these chaotic inputs without a proper filter, they create what ancient wisdom calls mental ama, or basically psychological toxicity. This toxicity completely clouds our internal clarity and drives negative emotions. This is exactly why curating our microenvironment is so absolutely vital. We literally have to use internal practices like meditation or even just intentional deceleration, like scheduling a simple screen-free evening just to filter out the noise.
It all really boils down to this one core truth. Internal equilibrium is the primary filter through which the external world is processed. Think about that for a second. If your internal state is clouded up with psychological toxicity, then every single email, every news notification, every minor little inconvenience is going to be processed as a massive system overloading threat. Protecting this internal interface isn't just a nice idea. It is the ultimate preventative medicine.
All right, let's bring it all together in Section 4, the Health Capital Framework. This is the core solution.
So, what does this actually look like in practice? The Health Capital Framework is essentially a translation engine. It brilliantly takes these ancient, somewhat abstract maps of human physiology and adapts them into a quantifiable, highly applicable system for modern life. It bridges hardcore medical science with individual lifestyle strategies, reminding modern medicine that there's absolutely no one-size-fits-all approach when it comes to surviving modern stress.
Within this translated framework, we focus heavily on what are called upstream modifiers. We're talking about psychosocial factors like your emotional states, behavioral choices, which ancient wisdom calls dinacharya or daily routines, and environmental interactions. And listen, these aren't just trendy wellness buzzwords. These are the highly practical everyday interventions you use to either actively invest in or actively deplete your overall health asset reserves.
By positioning these positive routines upstream, the framework helps us achieve the ultimate goal, building ojas. Ojas represents your deep, internal biological and psychological reserves. The entire idea is to systematically build these reserves up right now. Why? So that when modern environmental stressors inevitably hits you, and it will, you already have the structural resilience built up to absorb the impact, totally avoiding a systemic physical collapse. Which leaves us with one final, incredibly important question to chew on. Is your health capital ready for tomorrow's stress? Are your daily habits, your sensory inputs, and your routines actively building up your internal reserves, or are you just letting chronic modern stress slowly deplete them? Look, the ancient maps of human physiology are still incredibly accurate. We just need the health capital framework to help us navigate them today. Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer, and I really hope you walk away feeling empowered to start intentionally investing in your own internal equilibrium. Catch you next time.